Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film A Day with me, Jordan Woodley. After last week's viewing of Whiskey Galore, I was somewhat prompted to continue to sort of deep dive into more classic, early British cinema. Particularly, I was intrigued by Ealing Studios, so I thought I would take the opportunity to look at another one of their releases, the historical expedition epic that is Scott of the Antarctic. So, there are films which are obviously that you have blockbusters, which people go for entertainment, and the art of filmmaking is very much the balancing act between people going there frivolously just to watch something that stimulates adrenaline, but obviously the art form of film is also important. So, of course, the creative feat of filmmaking and the ways in which different filmmakers approach the sort of advancement of storytelling and the different ways you tell a story. And then I suppose the third aspect is, of course, the educational aspect, the sense that people go away feeling or knowing more from a film experience than they did going in. And of course, often that's more an emotional education rather than a literal education. But when you have films like this, obviously, I often wonder whether, obviously, older cinema had a much greater onus to educate and inform. Because the other end of the spectrum of the mindless blockbuster, the blockbuster that is entirely disposable, entirely just for the thrills, and when you leave you'll feel good, but you won't have any feeling, sort of emotional engagement. It was just for the thrill of it. Is the educational document film, and this is not something I've encountered a lot, admittedly, and it's definitely something that is not. It doesn't really exist in a great deal nowadays, other than in literal documentaries. But the idea here is that this is a film that is supposed to be a representation of a historical event, portraying it as accurately as possible. Now we do have films that do that. Thinking about it, something like an Erin Brockovich or something, or more recently the Mark Ruffalo film. I want to say it's called Stillwater, something like that, which is supposed to again recreate the experience, the struggle of normally legal struggles against big corporations, or even say something like a biopic like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which veered more towards being informative about the person than it was trying to be entertaining. But with Scott of the Antarctic, it is very clearly trying to be a cinematic historical representation of the experiences of these men. Now, admittedly, going in, I was incredibly skeptical of the feat of it. That I was kind of thinking, is this going to be the kind of film that once we get to the expedition and the struggle, the visual effects, the sort of the types of location filming they were going to do were just not going to hold up, especially as it was quite apparent in the early scenes that they were all on sound stages and it was all studio based. And I was and even as the voyage begins, I still got that sense of this feels very theatrical, very stagic. And I thought, oh wow, when it gets to the tragic part of the story of Scott and his team, when you're going to watch it thinking, this is just not, I just don't believe or engage in this. And to the film's credit, when it got to the point when they were struggling, I did start to actually believe. There was definitely a transition point where, when they're on the early stage of the voyage, when they've gone past New Zealand, they are south of New Zealand, getting to Antarctica, there was that sense of they don't have the sort of energy of people who are going into quite cold climates. They almost act as if this is just a voyage of any kind, and I do still feel there was that stagic sense of, oh, everything is fine until it's not. And it doesn't give you the struggle of environment that I'm used to in modern filmmaking. You know, something like The Remnant, where you feel from point one that the environment itself is a threat, an antagonist to your main character. Whereas there was definitely a point in which it wasn't, and then became so. And to its credit, as I say, when it got to that point, when people were starting to suffer, you got the sense of the environment, and the filming is beautiful and incredibly, you know, the fact that they obviously have gone to the effort to make it Technicolor, and represent the sort of visuals of the environment, it holds up. The problem is that there is definitely as I said at the beginning, it is much more interested in being informative. It almost feels less like a cinematic experience and more like a historical reenactment using diaries and accounts of the voyage, because it does have that unfortunate sort of 40s, also veering into sort of 30s style, where, you know, everyone is very sort of British upper lip tally-ho, very sort of classical British archetype character, which would work in, say, a drama set in sort of, you know, in a more urban setting, in a more sort of natural environment. But it doesn't necessarily work when they are struggling against the climbs, and, you know, you see the ups and downs of their experience. Their personalities don't feel like they are people against the odds, struggling in one of the most inhospitable climates in the world. It's all just that, it's written just that little bit too tally-ho, too sort of hands on hips, as it were. And admittedly, that makes a lot of this film a slog. It's not a long film. It's not even 2 hours, but the first hour of it is such a laborious experience. I got a very Deer Hunter experience from it, where, you know, it's a lot of people talk, you know, in a crowds, making announcements. There are a lot of people all talking at once. You do get some strange scenes with the wives of Scott, but then also of Wilson, when Scott's wife is very much the, I'm not going to be jealous of your journey, kind of, you know, supportive, encouraging, perfect partner situation. And then Wilson's wife is weirdly, and I'll credit her, because she's the only actor who feels like she's putting in like an emotional performance rather than a reenactment performance. But she acts as if she already knows he's going to die. The whole thing, especially when she's sort of waving him off, she's almost gives the energy of someone who's performing as if this isn't saying goodbye on your expedition. It's, I'm never going to see you again. Which, admittedly, you could sort of say, well, it's a bit metatextual, because it means the actor is portraying it knowing that. But again, she puts real emotion into it, where a lot of these characters don't feel real. They don't feel like people, at least not in the way that I would recognise as a viewer of cinema of 2021. And so when you get to the point where, and I will go into spoilers now, because again, this film is 73 years old. So when Taft dies, admittedly Taft's death is quite well done, and there is something quite sort of, the fact that they're not sure he's going to die. He seems to be struggling but getting on, and then he just dies. And I wish their performance was a bit more heightened to the reaction of his death and the struggle, and the fact that, you know, they've gone from 5 men to 4 men, which will make it harder for them, but also the fact that he was already struggling to survive, and sort of the emotional complexity of that. And then when, of course, Oates drags himself away, saying, I'm going now, I may be a while. Again, he does okay in the moment, but I feel this weird disconnect. You know, and I understand that this is a time in history where, you know, male emotion wasn't something that was expressed. But I wanted to feel like they were upset that their friends were dying one by one, and that they themselves had no assurance of survival. And of course, you get to the big climax where it's sort of it does become almost reenactment, where it's the letters that they wrote to their families as the last three men are dying, you know, are almost being read, being performed in voiceover. And obviously, the voiceover has a certain sort of omniscience to it, because it's no longer them as people. It's supposed to be more like a narrator, them acting as narrators. But again, I felt like, considering these are the last letters they would write to their wives or their mothers, and of course it goes into this strange sort of ghostly aspect of it. The way that they sort of deliver their last lines is supposed to be sort of ethereal and haunting. I needed that more of the sense of actual devastation and sadness, or a cocktail of emotions, which it didn't give me. It didn't give me. This is, as I say, and that's why I started talking about blockbusters and sort of educational films. This is a really important historical document film of the way that filmmaking was created in the late 40s. The fact that a film like this could be done, but frankly, it's a document. It's not a film that I would watch. I mean, not at all for entertainment, but I wouldn't even watch it just to sort of inform my sort of awareness of film. I would watch it as a document, or inform my experience of the tragedy of Scott and his team. It just feels like a film that is like a reenactment, like an educational experience. Going, oh, what happened during that expedition, and as I say, a sort of representation of filmmaking of the time and the fact that it could be done. And all I kept thinking was the fact that a couple of years ago, when I was doing the film show, Everest had come out, the one about the tragic team who went up Everest and for one reason or another didn't make it down. And again, it's not a fiction film; it's a biographical biographical film. And again, the difference in filmmaking is like apples and oranges, because it's, you've got the sense of loss of life, whereas here I just wasn't getting the intellectually I was getting it, but emotionally I was just not connected to the fact that these 5 people died in the ways that they did. But yeah, part of the education experience is not always to sort of go, oh, this is a great film, but also to sort of inform my awareness of filmmaking, different filmmaking styles, and different ways to process the cinematic experience. So I'm grateful for that, at least. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because it's all helping the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.